The snow was falling so heavily that night, it looked like the sky itself was breaking apart, scattering pieces of frozen glass over the city. Ethan stood beneath the dim, flickering street lamp outside the cafe, his breath turning to clouds, his fingertips numb despite the gloves he wore. He had been waiting for 3 hours, 3 long, lonely hours on what he hoped would be the first real step toward changing his life. He told himself he'd give it 10 more minutes, 10 minutes before he accepted that maybe no one was coming. But something in him resisted leaving, something deep and persistent, as if the night held a secret meant only for him, a secret that would change everything. If you believe in kindness, second chances, or the power of unexpected encounters, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps us continue bringing stories like this to you. The cold bit into his bones, but the ache inside was deeper. Ethan had been through a year of loneliness after losing his father and ending a long, draining relationship that had left him doubting his worth. His friends insisted he tried dating again, insisting he deserved something softer, warmer, something like love. So he reluctantly agreed to a blind date arranged by a coworker. Her name was supposed to be Maya. He didn't know her face or her voice, only that she liked books, autumn rain, and had a laugh that people found contagious. He didn't know why he felt hopeful, but hope had carried him out into the freezing night, where every passing minute felt like a test of patience, faith, and dignity. By midnight, the streets had emptied into a quiet white desert. Ethan pulled out his phone again. No messages, no missed calls. He sighed and told himself maybe she had changed her mind. Maybe she had seen his picture and decided before even meeting that he wasn't good enough. Those thoughts pierced him in places no winter wind ever could. Yet just as he began to turn away, he saw a figure across the street, small, trembling, wrapped in a thin coat that barely held back the storm. At first he assumed it was just someone rushing home, but then he noticed something odd. She wasn't moving. She was standing still, hugging herself, her shoulders shaking violently. Something pulled him toward her, not curiosity, but a strange, urgent concern he couldn't explain. As he approached, he realized she was younger than he expected, though exhaustion made her look older. Her hair was damp with snow, her lips pale, and her shoes soaked through. Her eyes met his, wide and frightened, as if caught between asking for help and being terrified to need it. She apologized before he even said anything, stammering that she didn't mean to bother him, that she just needed a place to warm up for a minute. But as her words tumbled out, he noticed she kept glancing at the stroller beside her, an old, squeaky stroller nearly buried in snow. Only when he leaned closer did he hear the soft, weak whimper of a child inside. Her name wasn't Maya. She wasn't his blind date. She was someone else entirely. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Ethan guided her toward the cafe door, thankful that the building stayed open late. The staff let them in with sympathetic looks, even though they were already cleaning up to close. Inside, the warmth hit her so hard she nearly collapsed into a chair. She whispered her name, Lena, and once her son stirred, she gently lifted him out of the stroller. The little boy couldn't have been more than 2 years old, his cheeks reddened by the cold, his tiny hands reaching for his mother's neck. Lena began rubbing them with her own palms, tears gathering in her eyes as she whispered apologies to him.
Ethan didn't know what to say. He didn't want to embarrass her or make her feel like a charity case, so he simply sat beside her, quietly letting her breathe in the heat her body so desperately needed. After a while, when she seemed calmer, he asked softly if she was all right. That single question broke something in her. Words spilled out, slow at first, then trembling, then shaken by guilt she had carried too long. She admitted she had nowhere to go tonight. She had left her small apartment after another argument with her landlord, who threatened to evict her if she didn't pay the overdue rent. She wasn't irresponsible, just overwhelmed. After losing her job, she had taken temporary cleaning work wherever she could find it, but winter was harsh, work was scarce, and she had fallen behind despite working herself to exhaustion. She hadn't eaten, her son hadn't eaten, and she had spent hours walking in the snow, trying to keep him warm with her own body heat, too ashamed to ask strangers for help. Ethan felt something in his chest twist painfully, not pity, but a deep ache of recognition. He had known hardship too, though never this kind. He saw the strength in her even as she shivered, the strength of a mother refusing to give up. He ordered food for both of them, warm milk for the child and something sweet for her, because she looked like she hadn't tasted anything comforting in months. When she tried to protest, insisting she would pay him back, he shook his head gently. He didn't want repayment. He only wanted her to feel human again. As the night carried on and the snowstorm raged outside, the cafe felt like a small pocket of safety suspended in time. Lena talked about her son, Noah, who had been sick recently, making everything harder. She confessed she felt like she was failing him every day, no matter how hard she worked. Ethan listened, not with judgment or empty sympathy, but with genuine attention. He admired her resilience. He admired her ability to hold herself together when everything around her was falling apart. The more she spoke, the more he realized how wrong he had been earlier, thinking he had been stood up, thinking the night had betrayed him. In truth, the night had brought him exactly where he needed to be. When dawn approached, the cafe staff announced they were finally closing. Outside, the storm had softened, but the world was still cold and empty. Ethan walked with Lena to the bus stop, but when the arrival screen flashed red, service suspended, he saw panic cross her face again. She tried to pretend she wasn't worried, but her eyes betrayed her. He couldn't leave her there, not with a toddler, not in the freezing morning air. So he gently insisted they come with him to a nearby shelter he knew. It wasn't much, but it was warm, safe, and staffed with kind volunteers. At first she refused out of pride, but when Noah whimpered in her arms, she nodded quietly. They walked slowly, cutting through silent streets, their breaths rising like ghosts around them. The shelter workers took Lena and Noah in, warming them with blankets, hot soup, and soft voices. As the volunteers helped her settle, Ethan stepped back, unsure if he should leave. He didn't want to overwhelm her, yet he didn't want to disappear either. But before he could decide, Lena approached him, her eyes still tired but steadier now. She thanked him, not just for the food or the warmth or the shelter, but for seeing her, for not judging, for staying. In the days that followed, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about them. His blind date no longer mattered. His disappointment no longer mattered. Something else had taken root, an unshakable responsibility toward the mother and child who had entered his life by accident, but had settled into his thoughts as if they had always belonged there. He visited the shelter often, bringing baby supplies, warm clothes, anything he thought might help. But more than the items, it was his presence that seemed to lift Lena's spirit most. She had spent so long surviving alone that having someone show up, consistently, without asking for anything in return, felt unfamiliar but deeply comforting. Days became weeks, and slowly the pieces of her life began to gather back into place. With the help of shelter staff and a local organization, she found childcare assistance and a job interview. Ethan helped her prepare, printing out resumes and coaching her through questions. When she finally got the job, a part-time receptionist position that offered stability, she cried in his arms, not because the job was perfect, but because it meant she could finally breathe. Noah adored Ethan. He would reach for him whenever he entered the room, babbling excitedly, tugging at his coat, giggling when Ethan made silly faces. Lena apologized for it, embarrassed, But Ethan always shook his head and lifted the boy onto his shoulder with a grin. He didn't mind at all. Their bond deepened gradually, not rushed, not forced, but growing with each shared hardship and each quiet victory. He admired her strength, she admired his kindness, and in the unspoken space between them, something gentle and hopeful began forming. Months passed before Lena finally moved into her own small apartment. Ethan helped carry boxes up the stairs, hanging curtains, assembling furniture, fixing squeaky drawers, and making the place feel like a home. When they finished, Noah fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from all the excitement. The room felt peaceful, warm, full of new beginnings. Lena stood beside Ethan, her eyes shining with gratitude. She confessed she didn't know why he had chosen to stay in her life when he could have walked away that first night. Ethan smiled, remembering the cold, the loneliness, the street lamp outside the cafe. He told her he thought he had been waiting for a date that night, but maybe he had actually been waiting for her, not because she needed rescuing, but because she helped him feel alive again. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, of recognition, of connection, of healing. And in that quiet moment, as snow began falling gently outside the window, not harsh, not stormy, but soft, like a blessing, Lena stepped closer and rested her forehead against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling the weight of all the nights she had fought alone and all the mornings she would no longer face without support. Their story didn't begin with love at first sight. It began with survival, with struggle, with a cold night and a mother too ashamed to ask for help. But maybe the most beautiful beginnings are the unplanned ones, the ones carved out of darkness, warmed by the small, brave kindnesses that change everything. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps us bring more emotional and inspiring stories to life. Special request: comment below with "Hope always finds a way" if you believe every struggling soul deserves a second chance. Ethan never met his blind date that night. Instead, he met the people who would change the course of his life. And as he looked at Lena and Noah, safe, warm, and filled with new hope, he realized that sometimes what we think is disappointment is actually destiny disguised in snowfall. He hadn't been stood up, he had been guided to someone who needed him, someone who would become his reason to keep believing in love, kindness, and the miracles that arrive in the coldest, most unexpected moments of our lives. And that is how a man waiting alone in the snow found a family he never knew he needed, and a mother who learned she never had to shiver through life alone again.